Black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them.
Welcome to another episode of the Open Mind Show. I'm your host, Christopher Balkrin. Folks, I thought long and hard about doing this episode about The View because I just find myself really upset sometimes when I hear them speak. But I said to myself, Christopher, do an episode so that you can share with others what you're thinking, because I think it's very important. So if you're liking my content and if you like more moderate politics in our discourse today, hit that like button, subscribe, and I hope you're enjoying this new angle that I've put on my camera instead of the direct down. Anyways, hit that like button, subscribe.
Well, if he's right, then why didn't people vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help the working class?
Kamala Harris did a terrible job marketing herself and showing that she was the more kind of reasonable presidential candidate. Also, people typically don't really vote based on policy necessarily. They vote on likability, charisma, etc. And I tried really hard to find Kamala's policy positions, and it was very difficult. And Trump was able to explain his policy positions at a grade 3 to 4 language where anyone could understand in very matter-of-fact terms. Kamala just couldn't, and that would be my criticism of Whoopi's point. But let's keep it going.
I mean, again, I got my popcorn. I don't know why people did what they did. I see all these reasons, and so, okay, time will tell. But what do y'all think?
I just, I know that as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny,
oh my God,
they're just alive and well. I think that we don't.
The idea that Trump is the candidate for racism and misogyny, this is where I just can't understand Sunny Hostin's points, because it totally does away with a lot of the policies that Trump put forward that resonates with Black and Hispanic groups in particular.
Don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at
now, look at this graph.
There's
this
a clear
wild.
racial divide
Look at this.
in who voted.
What she doesn't tell you is in the top left corner, it says 22,509 respondents. I don't know where this is taken from. So it should have like a polling and the source for that polling. Maybe it's in the description, but basically it just says the number of respondents. Now, if you look at this graph, it shows that there's 57% of those that were polled that were white voted Republican. 85% of those polled voted Democrat who are Black. 52% Hispanic, 54% Asian, and then other was 54% voted Republican. What's other? We don't know the makeup of that, and I'm assuming it's like Jewish, people of color, Indian, etc. But it's clear here that Sunny Hostin's point is to show that white people voted for Trump and Black people did not vote for Trump.
For Trump, as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris. It's very clear. It's not only clear by race, but it's also clear by education. And so
see, this is where it gets really interesting to me, because Sunny Hostin, I don't know what it is, but there is this elitism towards those with less education in the United States that I find liberals really do espouse, and sometimes even some elite conservatives do as well. It's this idea that you're too stupid to know what's best for you because you're not educated. I absolutely detest the word educated.
Well, the notion somehow that is not true.
Look at this. Perfect example right here. Again, we don't know where this poll is coming from. But again, let's just assume that it's like a legit poll that's reflective of the American population. I hope it is statistically relevant. 22,000 respondents. 63% Republicans never attended college. 63% voted Republican, never attended college. 51% attended college, no degree, associate's degree, and then those with bachelor's or higher voted in higher numbers for Democrats. So basically what Sunny Hostin, The View, is trying to tell us is that if only you were educated, you would vote for a candidate who was not racist or misogynist. If that's not divisive, I don't know what is. But basically, it's trying to say you're too stupid. That's why you voted for Donald Trump.
By education, those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I
And
think
I've
you're
said
missing
that.
his point.
Let me just
Okay.
finish. And so
Uh-oh.
I've
She
said that
can't finish
before,
her
and
point.
there was so much backlash because
Of course.
I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about
But
this
his
country.
whole point
It's not an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth. It's absolutely uncomfortable that The View can't seem to understand why so many are not resonating with the Democrats. So many people are just not resonating with the Democrats and their message. And that poll, I don't know if it's fully statistically relevant, but Sunny Hostin is basically driving this wedge into the analysis to say, if only you were educated enough, you would see that you should be voting for Kamala. And it's absolutely absurd. Okay, let's get it going because the response here is pretty interesting.
is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well, then why didn't black
and
people-
whether we
why didn't
agree
black
or
people
not
vote
with
for
Donald
it?
Trump's plans,
Black people
they
are
thought that he was
Can't even let her speak.
one of the
reflective.
poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny,
I didn't
you're
say the
missing
vast-
it. Most of my
I didn't say
family,
the vast
a lot of my
majority,
family doesn't
Alyssa,
have college
but
degrees.
the stats are the stats.
But that's not. It doesn't say.
They're-
You see how liberals do that. They point to a very specific graph that proves their point. May not be statistically relevant or not, and even if it is, what they're trying to say is that if you were only educated enough, you would not vote Democrat, or you would vote Democrat.
I voted for Donald Trump because of racism.
but this
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly the point. You see, and that's the point that I think a lot of Democrats or a lot of liberals miss. They say that you only vote on the basis of racism and misogyny. I mean, how ridiculous a point.
That's not.
you
Let me
can't-
just. What
you
stat
can't
are you talking
you
about?
can't dissect
Let me.
the
Yes,
two.
you can.
Yes, you can.
Hold
Right.
on,
Let me just-
calm down. Everybody just take a breath. Take a breath.
Well,
I see. So this is the part that I really do struggle with, and maybe it's me personally, but one thing I struggle with when liberals put out their politics, they put it out in a very condescending way, right? They take up a lot of space in a debate, right? Perfect example. Sunny Hostin was given a few minutes there to make her point, and I feel like Alyssa couldn't even get a sentence in without Sunny responding, and then Whoopi saying, "Everybody take a breath." Pause. Like, if you're going to put your politics out there and I'm forced to listen to your politics for 2-3 minutes, you have to be fair and give Alyssa or others 2-3 minutes to make their point. I mean, it's not a full debate, but I've noticed that this happens all the time in conversations. It's like the idea that you can't get a word out, and so many conservatives and Republicans, when they're sitting around the dinner table, they make this point several times. They say online that they feel suffocated. They feel stifled. They can't get a single word out before someone shouts them down. And that, I feel, is what's happening here. And I feel like Whoopi's like, "Everybody take a breath," is quite condescending. In this case, I think towards Alyssa's point.
Take a beat.
Well, let me jump in here because I think,
Yes.
Sonny, what you say is valid. And I think absolutely
What?
that is part of the problem. But when we hang our hat on that's the only problem or
no
the
one's
main,
saying it's the only.
I'm not saying you are,
You see,
but
she
I'm
can't-
saying
she
the
can't help
backlash
herself.
is that when people hang their hat on that being the only reason, any criticism of Vice President Harris must be because she's a woman or she's black.
Yes.
I voted for, thank you. I voted for Hillary Clinton, not because she was a woman, she was the most qualified. I voted for Vice President Kamala Harris because more of my
Wow.
values fell in line with what she stood for. So all of that can be true. There is something here to the socioeconomic class, though, that is crossing racial divide in academic and education, too. Americans with a college degree 30 years ago were roughly 20% of the population and held the same percentage of household wealth as those without a degree.
Yeah.
30 years later, this is important, Americans with a college degree account for 38% of the population and 73% of the household wealth. The haves and the have-nots have gone so far apart that they are rising up right now, and they cross every line of our democracy.
Okay,
Okay, can I?
Okay.
So
That's a very good point, actually. And so it's interesting to see what some of the responses will be. By the way, nobody yet has talked about the economy. Like, I think, we need to talk about the fact that cost of living is through the roof. Sunny did not even mention that. She was too focused on uneducated, to her words, and educated.
Go ahead.
I think most people are not saying that it was all about sexism and it was all
one's saying
about
that.
racism. Right. Most people are not saying that. I would say to Bill Maher, who I
Hang on. Isn't that exactly what Sunny Hostin said? That it was about racism and misogyny, that it's alive and well? Oh.
like, whose show I've been on several times, that maybe, just maybe, when you live life as a woman and as a woman of color, you feel it and you know it a little bit more than a white man does in America. And so I'm not saying, he says that folks see everything through the lens of racism and sexism. Not everything. But if you're not seeing racism and sexism in America, then you need to clean your lenses.
But if I
Okay, again, I couldn't disagree more, because again, while the View hosts are also fixated on racism and misogyny, there's nothing that the View hosts talked about when it came to Barack Obama scolding young black men for voting Republican. I don't know if you guys remember that video.
You're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable.
And you see that right there, that type of rhetoric, to me, is just indicative of the Democrats absolutely missing the boat when it comes to this election. People care about whether or not they can get ahead in the economy, period. And that doesn't matter if you're black, Hispanic, white. It just matters if you can get ahead. And the fact that the View hosts, as well as Barack Obama at the time, did not even consider that, I think is why the Republicans won not only the presidency, but the House and the Senate as well. And to me, I think there's a clear reason why Sunny Hostin and the View co-hosts don't talk about the economy, because it really does weaken their perspective. It weakens their position a lot. Nobody wants to admit that their party did something bad or wrong, and that maybe the Democrats bungled the economy with COVID and the payments and interest rates, and you can't afford a house. Like, maybe there's something to be said there. And that should take the temperature down, because if Trump were a black woman, what would the argument be? It would fall apart. But because he's a white man, and because he is quite bombastic in his opinions and his speech, they can really pick up on that. And I think that does such a great damage to liberals moving forward, Democrats moving forward. Because to me, I'm thinking in 2026, when there's the 2-year the elections, the midterms that happen in the United States, you have to really wonder, what will the game plan be for Democrats moving forward? It's not enough for them to say racism and misogyny. It wasn't enough in this election. It won't be enough in the midterms, and it probably won't be enough moving forward. And there are many reasons for that. One could be that more people of color are accessing higher education, are accessing better paying jobs, are in the middle class, are, quote unquote, educated. Like, there's something to be said for many underrepresented groups now becoming represented and still not voting for Democrats. I would actually be interested to know how many, and I don't know if there are stats about this, but how many like first generation immigrants voted for Republicans than Democrats? How many first or second generation immigrants voted for Republicans versus Democrats? And then you break that down by like race and age and gender, etc. And if we still see more voted for Republicans than Democrats, then the racism argument starts to fall apart. If we find that more young black men voted for Trump than Kamala, that racism stuff falls apart. And so to me, those are the very important stats we should look at as well. But That's the problem, I think, with The View. They really do some of the hosts stick to these very extreme talking points, and they drive a wedge into politics. They're as dangerous to the political discourse as, the Fox News and the mainstream media out there. They're just as dangerous, and I just wonder, how much longer will people still be watching The View? Maybe it'll be like me doing YouTube videos, but how much longer will people continue to watch The View and give them ratings? I just think their analysis is so far off. But let me know what you think in the comment section below, and let me know what you think about Sunny Hostin's view on Donald Trump's election win.